The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
Want to shake up your small business marketing? I mean, really shake it up.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Have you been thinking about doing your own podcast?
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Would you like to take your business to the next level?
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
This is the golden age of podcasting, and it's time to stop thinking and start doing.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Get your message heard 24/7, 365 over and over again.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Welcome to the Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Here's the creator and host of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, David Garofalo.
Welcome, everybody, to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is a 21-minute or less weekly podcast to help you get your message out, grow your business, and build your bottom line. Let me help you bring your marketing, advertising, promotion into the 21st century. My name is David Garofalo. I've been doing podcasting since 2010, and I've created a six-figure income. Actually, I met with my accountant yesterday. I made a lot of money on just one of my podcasts, along with other podcasts. I'm making money too now. So this is really happening. It's a real business, folks. This is a 21-minute or less podcast, so let's start the clock, and here we go. Today we're going to talk about more podcast stats and the big announcement. The first stat I want to talk to you about, the one that we did in front of your own ears, if you remember, if you're a regular listener of the show, is called the Snack Authority. If you've been following this podcast on the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, you saw that we created a podcast, what I call right in front of your own ears. We came up with a concept idea, everything. We put it together, simple and specific. It's called the Snack Authority. We're the authority on snacks. Each week, our expert panel, that's what we call ourselves, sample and compare a variety of snacks from well-known to the obscure. We cover all the bases from salty to sweet, satisfy your hunger as well as the curiosity, and join us as we eat, talk about, and discover everything there is to know about snacks. The Snack Authority. How simple of an idea. Let's just put it together. Let's see what we can do with it. The Snack Authority started on July 28th, 2018, and these are stats for 125 days. 18 episodes, that's what we did, and we have 4,428 people listen to this and or viewed it. That's an average of 246 people per episode. Can you imagine renting a hall and you have 246 people that are there and watch you eat a potato chip? That's what we did. We created this thing, and it's a baby right now. And we will get bigger. And we just started, 4 months ago?
Yeah.
Pretty good start. What we had hoped was going to happen, because we made a business plan, and this is what we hoped would end up happening. We're just warming up. We're infants here. But those are the numbers. Those are the numbers from Podbeam, which include Podbeam's app, iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, Player FM, Blueberry, Stitcher, and most podcast catchers, along with YouTube and Facebook Live. That's for vodcasting, for video on demand. It's growing. We will build it. It needs to be built. That's how you have to actually start a business. You have to build it, and they will come, right? That's what they say. You have to build it first, and then we will monetize it. We will build it, and then we will make money from it. We haven't done that yet, but again, we're that little into it, 125 days. But look we built an audience. Maybe there's somebody interested. I feel good about the chances of the success of the podcast we put in front of your own ears. I think we can do it. I think we can succeed from it. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, let's talk about other stats and see how they match up. There are now over 600,000 podcasts listed on Apple Podcasts. 600,000. That's over 4 million episodes altogether. 4 million episodes. How are they going to find me? How is anybody going to listen? Well, of those, 75,000 of them, 12% of all of them, never did more than one episode ever. One and done. 600,000 episodes, but 12% of them only did one and done. More than half of the remaining podcasts haven't published a show in the past 3 months or even longer. 3 months or even longer. So you're taking 75,000 off the 600,000. Now you're taking another more than half of that off it, leaving you 200,000-ish. That's over 300,000 shows gone that have not produced a show in the past 3 months or longer. If it was a business, if you had a store and they weren't open for 3 months or longer, you consider it closed, right? They're out of business. They just haven't, when it comes to podcasting, told anybody that they're out of business. Why not tell anybody that you went out of business? One of the reasons is because there's no cost to not telling you they're out of business. Unlike a real business that would have to pay rent and other expenses to still have that business and the sign on their business. A real business that would have to let people know and alert them they have stopped doing business. Yeah, but that's not the case.
You know, you're the same as me. You listen to dozens of podcasts. Yeah. So the podcast junkies, I mean, once a month for me, I go through and see, okay, well, are any of these not putting out episodes anymore?
Right.
And then you unsubscribe and move on to something else. So.
And that's the problem that happens when you do that. You hit unsubscribe.
Yep.
And if they end up starting up,
and then you've lost.
Yeah. So consistency is so. I see a lot of people doing not only episodes, but they're doing what they call seasons. Which is a scary thing also, that the next season comes and people forgot about it. So, you know, maybe they'll say, we're just going to do a summer show. Well, it's a long winter, my friends.
Yeah, I mean, the other format that skews the numbers a little bit, although there aren't that many of them, is some do just a serial. You know, it's a one and done, here's 10 episodes.
Yeah, that was the plan of it.
More in the entertainment genre.
Sure. But in that information, though, stays there forever and ever.
Right.
So maybe it's something that's there and can be, it doesn't have to be added upon. All the information is there for them to end up having it. Very little more needs to ever be added unless something changes in the business. It's one of the great things about a podcasting show. It can live forever. Its content will be there for advertising for years and years to come if there's advertising within it, or if your podcast is advertising for your business itself. It's there intact forever and ever. Once you put it out there, you don't have to do it over and over again. It was funny how when I started the Studio 21 Podcast Café, I actually said it speaking at a Chamber of Commerce meeting that, geez, I keep repeating myself over and over. I'm being asked the same questions. I'm leaving here and I'm going to put a podcast together so I don't have to keep saying the same thing over and over. That day I came in and I started the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, so I don't have to say something over and over. If you have a call to action on your podcast, which we talked about on previous episodes, they can still take action. If you still have those ways for them to connect to do that, go onto this website and you'll find this product over there, put this coupon code in there and whatever, all that stuff, it'll still be there forever and ever and ever, and it'll keep going on. You don't have to do a podcast forever in some cases. You just need to reach your desirable outcome, which might be different from one show to another. This show has a different desirable outcome than, say, the Snack Authority or the Cigar Authority, or different shows that we have, or different shows at the United Podcast Network. Our goal is, on the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, is for you to join the Studio 21 and join our United Podcast Network and help us grow and succeed. And that's the reason why we're putting this together. You might have noticed listening to this show, there was no advertising on the show. There was no purpose to monetize this within advertising. The purpose of this show is to get you and drive you to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. And there's a good reason for it. The reason is this is a business, the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. It's a business. So we put this together, this show together, to actually teach you how to do a podcast on your own if you want to do it, and to see that it is complicated. There's a lot of work to do if you do it on your own, and welcome you in here to see how little it is for us to do it for you. If anything, hopefully you got something and you're doing a show yourself. But looking at past episodes here, we started off with how to build your business with podcasting. That's actually exactly how we started. This is January of 2018, first episode, to explain to you that podcasting is a business as far as I'm concerned. If you're doing it for the fun of it or something, it's a different story. You're probably not interested in paying us to do your podcast at our show. It's a business. If you treat it that way, I promise you can make money doing this. Then we moved on to why do a podcast, the reasons to do it. How do you start? Organize, monetize. We talk about vodcasting, adding video content to your podcast. Training your listeners, asking people to do something, and they will do it because they love your show and they love you. How long should your podcast be? We got into that. To edit or not to edit your podcast. How much work goes into it? Should you be doing it? Should you be doing it? The introduction to your podcast, how your show open should be. Search engine optimization. How can people find you? Thinking about doing a podcast, the thinking that goes involving into your podcast. Cross-marketing your podcast with the product itself. Putting one in the can, having an extra one so that you keep going consistently to your show. Every single week it's there consistently to gain listeners. We're helping you with that. Segments and selling segments on your show. Part of monetizing, breaking your show up into segments and selling on them. Sharing your show, asking your listeners to share, asking your co-hosts and asking the people you're interviewing to share. Major monetization, getting into some major money making at this point. Knowledge is knowledge hurting your podcast, and getting into some of the things that end up hurting your podcast. Maybe you know too much and it's end up hurting your podcast. I'm not saying take it away, but take it away from your show, not from your mind. Can you swear in your podcast? We got into that. We got into finding topics. Some people are having a problem saying, geez, if I'm going to do a show every single week, I need 52 topics per week. We're helping you with that. The do-over. You've done a podcast. You've learned a lot listening to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. You learned everything you were doing wrong. Can you do a do-over? Can you switch it up? How to put together a new podcast. If you're going to add a second show on there because you've learned so much, once again, you want to start a second show like we did with the Snack Authority, saying, can we do this? This is when we started beginning to put together the idea of doing another podcast. The next steps of launching a new podcast. And this is when we came up with it. I'm going to eat snacks for a living. I actually put the show together, and here we are with some episodes behind us and some success already happening with it. Formatting your podcast, critiquing it, the game of numbers, how to accumulate the numbers and what you're looking for. Engineering your podcast, where Ed stepped in and explained the engineering part of it. Teaching you how to do it. Again, all these aspects of it. Putting your podcast on Facebook Live. Guests on your podcast. Wondering why you still haven't started. We're 32 weeks into this thing, and I'm scratching my head wondering why you haven't started a podcast at this point. Trying to motivate you, which is a big thing, coaching and motivating for your show. Podcasting versus radio, the anniversary show, getting into our 1-year anniversary here at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe with, at that point, 16 podcasters doing their show live weekly from here. Constructive criticism, what should the numbers be? A little bit of what we're talking about. What should your numbers be? Expenses versus investment in your podcast. Promotions, teasers. Are you still motivated? Is your show a turkey? How to look at it and know if the problem is you or your show or your co-host. We got into that. We got into plan B. This is for when the guest doesn't show up. What do? Have a plan B ready. Ideas for segments on your show, and here we are today talking about the different stats and things that we've done here on the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. That's a lot of content that we put out in 1 year. We gave you everything you need to know, actually more than enough to start a podcast on your own. We went even deeper. We got into it if your podcast is up and running and gave you all that. But that's not why we're here. We're here to get you to come on to Studio 21 and to join the Studio 21 Podcast Network. So I got a big announcement for you, and we're going to tell you about that in just 1 minute.
If you're in the area of Boston North into southern New Hampshire and you're thinking about doing a podcast, there is a place you have to see. It's called Studio 21 Podcast Café. Located right over the border into Salem, New Hampshire, Studio 21 Podcast Café is a live, working, full-service podcast and vodcast, that's video on demand, studio. All professional equipment, professional producer, and total distribution of your podcast is done for you. Would you like search engine optimization for more people to find your business or better ranking on Google? Well, Studio 21 Podcast Cafe can do it all for you for far less than you think. Schedule a free 21-minute no-obligation consultation by going to www.studio21podcast.cafe. That's studio21podcast.cafe. Now, back to the program.
And we are back, and today we're talking about podcast stats and the big announcement. And that's a tease, right? Drawing you on to get you past the commercial break and onto it. But this time, we're not just teasing. It's a big announcement, and Ed's going to make sure the big announcement, the big announcement, is going to be on the title of the show so we can get that in there to draw people in, because things may change up a bit after that point, and somebody will go back to say, well, what was the big announcement? Because something changed here, and something is going to change. It takes any business 3+ years to build a business, right? If you're a business person, if you're an entrepreneur, you know it takes you over 3 years just to bring your business up to a break-even point. Podcasting is a business, and as we went through it, more than half of the people quit podcasting after 90 days, and less than 5% of all the podcasters make it past the 3-year mark. And this happens in a lot of businesses, right? They just didn't do it. They were getting there. Things were ready to go over the hump. They ended up quitting after all that work they did, all the upfront work, which is the most work, right? Getting started is the toughest part of all. It gets easier as it goes on if you know what you're doing. Less than 5% make it past the 3 years, and that's when the monetization and things really start to happen. I've been doing my podcasting since 2010 and created a 6-figure income from just one of my podcasts. That's a 6-figure income yearly. And as I said, this year I met with the accountant, man. It's some serious numbers. You can do it too, but you need to know what to do. The fact of the matter is I told you what to do already. Do I have to keep saying this over and over? You have to stick to it. You have to do what I said to do, and you have to stick to it. And in some cases, you actually need to start. You're still listening to this podcast, and you still haven't started. You went through all these episodes, and you still haven't started. What can I say to get you going? Oh, my God. You're either going or you're not going. So here in the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, we do this podcast for one reason, as I said. It's to get you to join here at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, which is located in Salem, New Hampshire, right over the Massachusetts border. And I know some people listening far away, and there's no way they can be part of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe to do their podcast with us and to join the United Podcast Network. That's our ultimate goal to end up happening, but it can't be done. You live in Arizona. You live in California. How can you do it? Over the past 50 episodes, we taught you how to do it yourself anyway, but we explained the troubles and tribulations that might come along with doing it yourself. That was part of the thing, so do you understand how hard it is? And if you were local, you would probably want us to do it for you because it would be a better option for you to do. We gave you valuable free information that we learned over all the years that we've been doing this. I've been doing it for 9 years, and all the information I gather, I gave it to you for free 100%. What I hoped to happen was reciprocity, which is we give and then we get. Right? We give you all the information, and then we get you to come in, and then we try to close you. And see, frankly, it worked. We got the information out there. It's all done. It's all there. It's in a neat bow. It's Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. There it is. We have not run out of information to give you. But any more information that we provide you now, we've already touched upon, and unless we go to the next step and you've even started a podcast, there's no need for it. There's no need for me to get deeper into this thing when you haven't even begun the things I've told you, or you haven't gone through everything we've already said already. So that's it. It's laid out. Everything you need is there. You don't have to go to school. The school is already provided. It's all there for you to actually do it yourself. If you did start, congratulations. We hoped we helped in some way. We've produced over 50 podcasts, episodes of this show. There's more than enough to teach you what to do and, more importantly, what not to do. They are there for you, and we will get new listeners to listen to this all the time. So it's there, as I told you, it's there forever. The Studio 21 Podcast Cafe will continue, but like any good business, it's expected to go past the 3-year barrier for sure. But as of this point right now, we will not be giving it away for free anymore. All the old episodes will remain there, and from time to time we may add something to it if possible. And what we would add is try to get you again to come in and do business with us. If something major changes within the podcast industry, we'll get it up there, and so you'll be updated on something major that ends up happening. But podcasters that do their show here at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe and are part of the United Podcast Network will be the only ones that will get access to the new episodes, because we're going to go deep at this point. We're going to help them one-on-one, and we're going to get deep into where we know they're going in the direction of things that happen. I'm taking a guess with you guys to understand that I don't know your business or anything. The people at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, we know what their shows are and what they're trying to accomplish. With you, I'm taking a guess. I'm figuring I'm hitting some points here. Hopefully you can connect the dots and make it so that it does fall into your exact business frame that you're looking at. For the people in the United Podcast Network, it will be beneficial to them, as we already know what they are doing and continuing to help them and continuing for their success. We are here to help our customers at that point, the customers of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. We will go deep and make their podcast greater, and we will help them monetize their show and grow their business. For you that haven't started yet, please go back and listen to old episodes. Start from the beginning of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. We tried to do it in a certain order and build as we went on. Start from the beginning. It's a new year right around the corner. It's time to start doing things, get motivated. Please start. That's the whole thing. Here at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, we know how it works, because podcasting is what we do. We have a clean, professional podcast studio with state-of-the-art equipment. We have a professional engineer and producer here to make you sound good and to look good. Plus, we got a little coaching that helps along the way. Are you too busy to do it yourself? We can help. We'd love to work with you. Contact me at dave@studio21podcast.cafe. That's Dave at Dave at studio, 21podcast.cafe. Schedule a free 21-minute meeting with me. Let me show you the studio. We'll talk about your thoughts, your business, your plans, and I'll even buy you a cup of coffee. So that's it. That's my 21 minutes or less. We went a little over today. I knew it was going to happen. But we are officially out of here. Happy New Year, everybody. A great 2019 to you. Remember, stop thinking about it and start doing it. You've been listening to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, live from the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe on the United Podcast Network.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.